Welcome to the local campaign, and thank you for joining us on Rogers TV. Today we are going to meet the candidates who are running in the municipal election on October the 22nd in Ward 6, that is Stittsville Ward. There are two candidates who are running. I'll introduce them to you in a moment, but first I'll explain how this debate is going to work. Each of the candidates will have 1 minute to provide an opening statement. The order for those opening statements was drawn at random before our telecast. Then we will proceed through a series of debates on the important topics in Stittsville Ward and throughout the city of Ottawa. As we open each of those debates, I will direct a question to one of the candidates. That candidate will have a minute to respond to the question, and then we'll open it up to both candidates for debate on that topic and everything related to it. That will continue for several minutes, and then we'll wrap up with a final response from the person to whom the question was directed. Each of the candidates will get a number of questions, and then we will move to closing statements, which we will do in the reverse order of the opening statements, which again was drawn at random. So let's meet the two candidates on the ballot in the municipal election in Stittsville Ward 6. They are Glen Gower and Shad Qadri. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for joining us, and we are going to begin with your opening statements, and going first will be Glen Gower. Go ahead, you have 60 seconds.
Thanks, Mark. I'm a lifelong Ottawa resident, and I moved to Stittsville with my young family nearly 10 years ago. And even in that short amount of time, we have seen tremendous growth and change in the community. I'm running because we need a stronger voice to stand up for the issues and concerns of Stittsville residents at City Hall. Since May 1st, I've knocked on thousands of doors, and there are three themes that come up over and over again. Number one is healthy development. People want better decisions on how we plan and build communities, and they want a transportation network, roads, and transit to support this growth. Number two is safe streets, and yes, there is much more we can do. I look to communities like the City of Edmonton, where through an aggressive program of enforcement, education, and road design, they've really made a difference. And the third area is accountability, communication, and engagement with residents. People have lost trust with the city over issues like John Woods. We need to rebuild that trust, rebuild that engagement with City Hall.
All right, thank you. Next up is Shad Qadri. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mark. Stittsville has a diverse business community. Serious crime is a rarity, and we are fortunate to have beautiful outdoor features. Stittsville is a community where people want to live. We're the fastest growing area in Ottawa, which requires careful stewardship to ensure development respects the existing community and provides for our future needs. I'm talking about safe roads, reliable transit, responsible waste management, robust emergency services, and a comprehensive public health. Growth can't be stopped. That's a legal reality, but it shouldn't be feared either. With diligent leadership, active oversight of planning process, and input from the community, growth can be a positive influence that creates opportunity. Now is the time when the experience I've gained and the relationships I've cultivated can best serve the community. I have the vision and the knowledge to successfully guide Stittsville through the next 4 years. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you to both our candidates. We're going to start now with a question to Glen Gower. Let's talk about light rail. Do you feel the people of the West End got shortchanged when the light rail plan was finalized, delaying light rail to the West End until phase 3? You have 1 minute.
Thanks, Mark. I mentioned in my opening, one of the top concerns of residents is around transportation. Safe, reliable, affordable transit. You know, we've seen light rail going out to Orleans. We see bus rapid transit going out to Barrhaven. And Stittsville and Canada always seem to be lagging behind. I know that we can't send it everywhere at once. It's a budget issue, but I would have expected a much stronger role from the West End councillors, including Councillor Qadri, to advocate for transit to Stittsville and Canada sooner. 2031 is not soon enough.
Okay, it's open to both of you to debate light rail transit, serving the West End, and so on.
Well, again, Mark, thank you for the question. In terms of the LRT coming to Stittsville, in the last, I guess, couple of months, all three West End councillors have worked very diligently in order to get an environmental assessment done for LRT to come out to Canada, Stittsville. And that's what we've been working on. And we've got that environmental assessment complete, and we're moving forward in the next term of council. The issue is that in terms of timing is because of the financing. If the financings come through sooner, then I've already had the mayor, talk to us and say that we could build it sooner. The issue about not getting it sooner in terms of east and west or into the farther west is because we don't have the ridership, or we didn't have the ridership up until a couple of years ago when the ridership on the east was greater, and that's where the LRT headed first,
Shad,
and not to the west.
We didn't have the ridership because we haven't had the service. If bus service is not reliable, if buses are getting canceled, 30% of some of the 262s are getting canceled on a month-to-month basis. A third of the buses are late. Pardon me, not canceled, they're late. It's unreliable service. While we're waiting for the funding for LRT to come to the city, how about improving the existing bus service so that parents can get home from work in time to pick up their kids from daycare, so that seniors can get to their appointments on time? There's more we can do. It doesn't have to be billion-dollar transit ideas. It's just operational focus to make sure buses show up on time when they're supposed to be here. That's where we need more focus with our transit system.
And Glenn, exactly that point. I've discussed that with OC Transport as recently as last week, and they tell me that the buses are late because of reasoning. Reasoning is all the construction that's happening downtown due to the LRT. They've said to, and I posted it on my website, the fact that they will be reviewing all of the transit services into Stittsville. The other thing is that our roads aren't even complete in some of the newer communities. No use putting a bus into Stittsville when they can't even travel on some of the streets that are being built. So until that road network is complete, the busing will come through that community and will go forward. In terms of I checked with OC Transport, 80% of the morning transit and afternoon trips are on time, and maybe 20% are not, but that 20% is due to a reason where the construction is happening downtown or other factors within the operations.
And
Okay. Glen Gower, you get the final 30 seconds on this anyway, so go right ahead.
Thanks, Mark. That's exactly the issue. The gap between when we build all these new homes and when the transportation infrastructure comes, roads and transit, it's just too wide. We're not talking a year or two. We're talking 5, 10, 15, 20 years. It's just too wide of a gap, and no wonder people don't trust OC Transpo to get them to work on time. If there's that high of a late occurrence, it just doesn't make sense. We need to be more of a focus on the operational activities of OC Transpo as much as we need to look at the long-term LRT possibility to Stittsville and Canada.
Okay, thank you both. We'll move to the next question now, which I'll direct to Shad Qadri. There are some people who feel that tax increases capped at 2%, as they were for the past 4 years, have put too much pressure on city services. Would you support a higher tax increase over the next 4 years in order to fund important services and more investments in infrastructure? You've got 45 seconds.
Thank you again, Mark, for the question. And my point at the present time is that I want the taxes to go up based on inflation. That has been my platform for every term that I've ran in council. Now, in the last council, we did put a cap on of 2%, and we abided by that 2% cap. In terms of the compounded tax increases for the city of Ottawa, we're at about 18.4% for the last 8 years. And that cap has been there from day one. The issue is, though, the taxation is there, and I want to maintain it to inflationary rate. The thing is, for infrastructure that you refer to, Mark, I'm willing to look at that infrastructure and see if it needs another 0.5% or 1% added, and we'll discuss that at council next term.
It's open to both of you now on this topic.
Well, we have common ground on one thing. We both believe that tax increases should be tied as close as possible to the rate of inflation. Where I have a real problem, though, is how the city has set budgets and run budgets over the past 4 years. There's a real lack of transparency. While you've set this arbitrary and artificial 2% rate, meanwhile, we've seen sewer bills, water bills go up, we've seen bus fares go up, and you've dug yourself an even bigger hole in terms of the debt or the gap in infrastructure funding. We're now $70 million behind where we should be to fund infrastructure repairs on things like roads, on things like parks, and other community facilities.
The infrastructure funding that you refer to, Glenn, is because of the LRT. It's one of those major projects in this city. We do still have a AAA rating with the Moody's Credit Services. So the city is not overfinanced. City's got the right amount of financing in terms of debt that we've accumulated so far. But in terms of the infrastructure, we've dedicated many dollars to the infrastructure, including the fact that we just did almost $1.5 million towards potholes repairs that everybody talked about at the end of the
But
season.
it's not enough. You're in a $70 million infrastructure gap for
funding. 1 second, Glenn. The $70 million gap that you refer to, look at the gap itself and see what the gap is for and why the gap has happened. It's not because we're not repairing roads. It's not because we're not plowing snow. The gap is there for other reasons. Gap being in terms of some of our MUP funds and money are going to a larger project where we're making the city grow up a little bit. We're making the city advance and become a world city with the introduction of
51% of parks and recreation facilities are in poor to very poor conditions. Because of this gap, we're going to have to pay for it sometime. I think the city set an arbitrary and irresponsible tax increase rate.
And
if we can't afford it, we need to be transparent with residents and make sure that they know what they're really
It's
paying
not
for.
something that we did behind closed doors. Every council person in the city agreed to that 2%, and that 2% is what we carried forward and committed to and abided by it at the end of the term.
And now you're throwing over an idea of an additional infrastructure levy. If it's a tax, call it a tax.
You can call it whatever you like, but the issue is that there is money that we have decided to spend on infrastructure.
Okay. Shad, Qadri, I asked you the question, so you get 30 seconds to wrap up on this topic.
And again, coming back to the infrastructure and the money that is spent on infrastructure in this city, we have lots of money in infrastructure that we've spent. Keeping in mind that this city is not a brand new city across the city. You've got downtown cores and you've got other urban areas that are suffering because of the lack of infrastructure in terms of the age of the infrastructure. The Ottawa River Action Plan is a good example where we have to get to that plan and work with it and invest in it so we're not running sewage down the Ottawa River as we've done for years.
Okay, thank you. I'll direct the next question to Glen Gower, and it's a question from a resident. Is Stittsville getting sufficient police coverage? And if not, what can be done to increase patrols and traffic stops? You have 45 seconds to get us started.
It's a great question, and thanks to the resident who sent that in. I actually had a chance on Friday night to go on a ride-along with a Ottawa police constable, and it was some fascinating insight into what they deal with on a regular basis. I think whenever we're talking about police service and funding of the police service, we need to be looking at the data. I see, in general terms, the number of calls to police in Stittsville is going slightly down. I'm not sure if it's early enough to call it a trend, but also seeing some worrying statistics in the West End about violent crimes. So clearly there's a need to be looking at how we are doing our policing, funding our policing. Another concern I hear often from residents is about enforcement of traffic, of speeding especially. So those are the things that we need to continue to make sure we're funding and paying attention to going forward.
Okay, it's open to both of you now, and you're welcome to continue to focus specifically on the issue from a ward perspective or to broaden it out to talk about some issues related to policing in Ottawa.
Mark, thank you again for the question. In terms of the speeding issue that Glenn just mentioned, it is a city-wide issue. It's not just a Stittsville issue or a Canada issue. And that citywide issue was identified in this term of council and suggested and said that we needed about $40,000 per ward in order to put traffic calming measures, temporary traffic calming measures in the wards and across the city. And that's what we've done. We put in speed signs and as well as other measures in terms of traffic calming. The policing, yes, I agree that the policing is maybe lagging a little bit in terms of their new model that they're working with, and we just haven't gotten used to that new model. The thing is to keep that model going. We don't want to give it up in the middle of the term. Let's start that model going forward and see how it works out. We've only had that, the community policing model for about 6 months now, or maybe a year. The issue is that the model may not be working in terms of community policing, and that's something that I've already talked to the chief about that we need to review and look at.
Let's talk about traffic calming. You mentioned the $40,000 a year budget. Much of that seems to be going towards these flex stakes that, in my opinion, are one of the least effective measures for actually dealing with speed. I mentioned in my opening the City of Edmonton. They subscribe to a program called Vision Zero, which is a set of guidelines around how we can have real action and real progress on decreasing speed. You can't just put up a speed limit sign and a flex stake and hope it works. You need to have enforcement, you need to have education and awareness, and you also need to have road design, not temporary traffic calming measures, but when you're actually building communities, when you're actually designing the roads in the first place, learn from your previous mistakes, adopt the best practices that world-class cities have worldwide.
1 second, Glenn. It's not a previous mistake. What it is you talk about Vision Zero. The City Council put a motion forward that the City of Edmonton abortion model was a good one, and we were going to look at that, and we did. There's a 60% decrease in injuries and fatalities in collision from 10 years ago in 2006. There's also the collisions are down from 80, or injuries are down 82.46 injuries in 2006. I mean, imagine that the Vision Zero does work, and we have incorporated it as a city. Is the project complete? No. The final numbers of this will be coming out next year as to how well this worked in the city of Ottawa in terms of the Vision Zero that Edmonton put in.
Okay. Glen Gower, you get the last 30 seconds on this. Go
You're
ahead.
absolutely right. Vision Zero has been successful in Edmonton, has reduced the number of serious and fatal traffic injuries by 60%. It's a model that we could be using here. We're dragging our feet on bringing it in. And what the numbers on deaths and on serious injuries, what they don't always tell you is the comfort level. Parents, grandparents don't feel safe letting kids walk to the school, walk to a park. To me, that's a failure in residential communities like Stittsville. There's far more that we could be doing to take action and make progress on this file.
All right, thank you both for your comments on that topic. I will direct a question now to Shad Qadri. Should Ottawa opt out of having private cannabis stores? And if not, would you want a private cannabis store in Stittsville ward? Go ahead, you have 45 seconds.
Thank you, Mark. And in terms of the cannabis, it's a new item that's coming forward to the city and every other city or municipality in Canada. It is an issue that we must look at seriously and see how we go forward. We still haven't even got the rules in terms of where the cannabis is going to be sold, in terms of what type of stores or where on the street. The issue for me is until that is identified and that is described by the provincial government what the rules are, we would have to take a serious look at that going forward. My biggest concern is the location of those stores. We have to revise and look at our bylaws in the city and see how that's going to work out and go forward with that. I'm in favor of cannabis stores, but not necessarily at any cost.
Okay, it's open to both of you on this now. Go ahead.
Well, I'm going to give you a clear position on where I stand on retail cannabis stores. First of all, I would have preferred to see a slow rollout, an LCBO model. Reality is that's not the case. The provincial government has changed the rules. What I would support is on a very limited basis retail cannabis stores in the city of Ottawa. There's three conditions that need to be in place. First of all, there needs to be the proper zoning, the rules around where these can be located. We need to keep them away from vulnerable areas, schools, other vulnerable communities. We need to have a full licensing and inspection scheme to ensure public health and public safety. We also need to make sure that we have the funding for police and public health so that people's health and well-being is protected. If these things are in place, we can move forward with, on a limited basis, private retail cannabis stores in the city of Ottawa. I have a clear position, and Shad, you know, you are the chair of the Board of Health. This is an issue that's been on your radar, and I still don't know where you stand on this.
I'm being very cautious with this approach because the Ottawa Public Health may still have some issues. The Ottawa Police definitely have issues. I'm not going to rush into something and say, hey, let's open the doors and sell cannabis everywhere and anywhere. The issue is until we get proper guidelines from the province as to where they should be sold, where they can be sold. We've already had a change in government. We've already had a change in that positioning going forward. My concern is if we say, oh yeah, we're going to sell cannabis in any store or at every store in the city, then that may create problems. May not
I
resolve
agree with you. We need to proceed with caution.
Let's wait till we get the rules. Let's wait till we have all of the facts identified and then go forward. I've already said my position that I am in favor of cannabis stores, but the issue is I'm not in favor of cannabis store at any cost and anywhere.
We need to proceed with caution approach, absolutely. We need to listen to all the stakeholders, the public, the police, public health, cannabis industry, community members. I'm glad you finally told us your position on that, because up to now you've been very unclear about whether you support it, and it's something that residents have wanted to know. I've heard about it.
I've not had that position in terms of just recently. I've had that position as far back as when an announcement was made about cannabis. I said that I wasn't ready because we didn't have all the guidelines and the rules. Look what's happening in Colorado. I mean, you don't have to go too far to look at what's happening in Colorado with legalized cannabis. I don't want that for the city of Ottawa.
Okay. Shad Qadri, I asked you the question, so you get the final 30 seconds on this topic.
And thanks again, Mark. In terms of the cannabis, I mean, it's not something that you can open and close the door once the door is open. You have to be very careful. You have to be very clearly understanding what the issues are and what the concerns are with cannabis. Medicinal marijuana, I have no problems with at all. It's the casual use of marijuana or cannabis that I'm concerned with. I mean, you've got lots of young children in this city that are, their minds are, very, very fast, made quickly. I don't want to put that pressure on the community and the city.
Okay. So in the interest of time, we're going to move to a couple more questions now. There won't be debate, but I'll give each of you a minute to answer the question. So I'll direct a question to both of you. You'll both have the opportunity to respond, and you'll each get 60 seconds for that response. So Glen Gower, will go first to you on this question, but Shad, Qadri, you'll have a chance to answer it as well. What do you think is the most important issue for Stittsville Ward, and what do you intend to do about it?
I think it's the transportation infrastructure. It's the roads and transit. In particular, there's one road project that I hear all the time when I'm knocking on doors, and that's Carp Road. This road is in desperate need of an upgrade to support the tremendous growth that we've seen in our community. And it's something that I'll focus on as an advocate and work with colleagues and work to lobby to make sure the city provides the funding to expand the Carp Road. I know it's in the plans. It should have happened many years ago. We need it to happen as soon as possible.
And I'm in total agreement with you, Glenn. Carp Road is a key piece of infrastructure in our community, and that is why we completed an environmental assessment on the shelf, ready to go when we get the money to build that road. And for me, Carp Road is the key piece, or one of the key pieces. There are others. There's the Robert Grant Avenue, phase 2 of which will take it from current Abbott Street to Hazeldean Road. I'm working with the building community to see how we can front end that road so we can get the road faster and sooner. And that road is a 2-lane road right now. In the future, like maybe 20 years out, they may convert it into a 4-lane road. But that road is going to be built because that's a north-south arterial that is coming forward.
Remember, it's not a debate. It's just one at a time here.
It's happening years after the homes get built.
You had your minute. It's Shad Qadri's time now.
That is why that road is going to move forward in this term of council, and I'll make sure of that working with the building community. Also with the city, in terms of not only Carp Road and Robert Grant Avenue, but as you mentioned about light rail, I was fantastically ecstatic when I heard and found out that the LRT is coming to Stittsville. That took a lot of work between the 3 councillors and our MP, Karen McCrimmon.
Thank you. Again, I'll just remind you that these are just questions where we're asking each of you to answer the question in turn, not to have a debate on it. I'll direct this question to Shad Qadri. This is a question from a resident as well. Should there be term limits on city councillors? And are there any other changes you would make to the structure of city council? You have 1 minute, and then Glen Gower, you'll have a minute after that. Go ahead.
Thank you to the resident who posed that question. It's a very interesting question. The term limits, let me answer that first. We already have a built-in term limit. It's every 4 years. It's called the election. That is a great term limit. If people of a community or a city don't want a particular councillor or a municipal elected official, they can vote them out every 4 years. So in terms of the council currently, I think we have an appropriate number of councillors distributed evenly. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, City of Ottawa population is very complicated in terms of the locations of the population, from urban, suburban to rural. All 3 sectors have different needs and different needs that must be met. And that's where I think the councillors that are currently there represent those areas very, very well. And I would like to continue with the current number of councils going forward in this term of council coming up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Glen Gower, you've got a minute on this as well.
I would actually support a maximum 2-term limit, so a maximum of 8 years. And if there's not a formal limit, I'll commit to only serving for 2 years if I'm fortunate enough to be elected. Shad made the same promise, by the way, 12 years ago. Now, I've looked into other governance models. I think you always have to be looking at how do you do a better job representing residents? How do you do a better job as councillors ensuring there's sound fiscal control and that you're making effective decisions on how you deliver services, core services to residents? There's many examples of other structures. For example, in Vancouver, they have 10 councillors and a mayor. They're voted in citywide, but they also are supported by a whole network of advisory boards and committees, including a elected Parks and Rec board. So there's many different models on how you can ensure residents are effectively represented and that the affairs of the city are being looked after. I'm always open to having a review at the city level here in Ottawa.
Okay, thank you both. We are going to move to the closing statements now from each of the candidates. Once again, each candidate will have 60 seconds to speak directly to you, the voters, and we'll do those in the opposite order of the opening statements, starting with Shad Qadri. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mark. Before I was your councillor, I was a small business owner, so I know those challenges. I was one of the founding members of the Stittsville Village Association after amalgamation to provide residents a greater voice on community issues. So even then, I was working with the community. I spearheaded the Stittsville Main Street Community Design Guidelines to development for Main Street. I have initiated agreements that preserve green spaces like the Shea Road Woods and created outdoor amenities like the new community-friendly Kavanaugh Green. Our youth will soon have a new skateboard park to go with dozens of other parks and recreational facilities built in our existing and future neighborhoods. And I've always prioritized open communication with the community. I've learned a lot and I'm proud of my accomplishments. I have a vision for my community and my work isn't finished. On October 22nd, I ask for your support. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next up, Glen Gower with your closing statement.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks as well to the crew here at Rogers for the opportunity to debate today. You've heard a lot of common ground between Shad and I. We both care a lot about our community. We've been dedicated volunteers, and we bring a business background to the role. The difference is I'm the only candidate with really fresh ideas. I'm a strong, independent voice, and I have the drive and passion to make things happen. And Shad, I've heard a lot about your experience. I've known you for a long time. I'm still not clear on your vision for the community. I want you to visit my website if you're watching today, voteglen.ca. You'll see my clear platform and action plan on issues like healthy development, safe streets, and accountability. And I want to say thank you to the hundreds of people who've requested a lawn sign, made a campaign contribution, or helped out in ways big and small for my campaign. I'm more confident than ever that together we can build a vibrant community in Stittsville, and I look forward to earning your trust and earning your vote on October 22nd. Thank you.
All right, thank you both for participating in the debate today for Stittsville Ward 6. And thank you for watching. I'll remind you that Election Day is October the 22nd, and Rogers TV and 1310 News will have live coverage of the results beginning at 8 o'clock on election night, along with some analysis from some experts. We'll give you exactly the picture of what your municipal government will look like for the next 4 years. Thanks for watching The Local Campaign.